Deladonna. I'm the Farm to School Director at Georgia Organics. I am a chef by training, but a fruit and vegetable pusher by trade. I'm here with Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I know many of y'all. It's so good to see familiar faces and familiar names popping up and in the chat box. I have been an educator in Atlanta Public Schools for about 12 years now. And a lot of these lessons and ideas that we went over today, I have tried out and made mistakes and had successes for many, many years in person in the classroom. And over the last couple of months, I've been teaching all virtually. So today we'll talk about sort of both of those applications. And just a reminder that we have so many folks here with so much knowledge and information that have tried a lot of these different ideas, that have researched some different things that are in different settings. And I encourage all of y'all to jump in at any point in the chat box and share your ideas. I really see myself as just the facilitator of this conversation. I'll show you some cute pictures of kids, tell you some funny stories, ask the right questions, but please jump in and help us figure out together what the best way is for us to plant and grow food with our kids during these winter months as we're preparing for spring. So one of the things that I think we could all benefit from knowing before we get started is where we're all coming from. I saw in the chat, it's really fun to see where in Georgia you're coming from, because it's amazing in Georgia. We have so many different climates, from the mountains all the way down to, I think I saw someone from Waycross, to the coast over by Savannah. We have so many different climates. And of course, that really impacts how we are growing outdoors and what our timing is for growing indoors. And then also, really relevant to this conversation is where you're going to be teaching this semester, where you're planning to be teaching. Are you going to be in a classroom working with kids where you might have a classroom garden on a windowsill inside? Are you going to be teaching in a home or to your children's homes like I am, where I'm dropping off the seeds and supplies at all my kids' homes and I'm teaching out of my home like this? Virtually like that, or maybe you are homeschooling, or you have a pod and you have a small group of kids that are sharing some sort of space or a home, or other. Of course, there's so many unique situations we find ourselves in now with the opportunity to teach children, and where you are going to be really determines how you are going to be able to implement some of these different practices. So you'll see a poll pop up here. And when you see that poll, if you will jump in there and let us know where you'll be teaching, then that'll help us sort of direct the conversation to how we can make these activities work for you this coming semester. It looks like there's still a lot of folks teaching virtually, and I imagine for many of us it's very new. This is my first January, February, March teaching virtually, slowly figuring it out. A couple folks teaching in a home, a couple in a classroom, and some other situations. All right, so we'll keep all of these ideas in mind as we share. Again, please jump in at any point and share what's worked for you, or what ideas you have, or what questions you have as we go along. All right, so let's get started here on what is Farm to School. What's the big picture? Why are we all in this room together? Where are we trying to go with our kids? And then we'll get into the details of what these activities are that we can do right now, even though it's freezing cold, in my personal opinion, outside right now.
All right, so what is Farm to School? I imagine many of you are repeat customers here to our webinars, so you've probably heard us talk about what Farm to School is before. So today we're simply going to tell you that we think that the best Farm to School programs engage students in experiential learning in the classroom, in the cafeteria, and in the community. So simply put, and especially while we're all experiencing different ways of teaching and engaging, our virtual Farm to School workshops are working to empower you to do Farm to School by using local food and gardening activities to both feed and teach kids.
And during this time of year, one of our big themes is around seeds and new growth. We're all in this time of like hibernation in the winter, but the sun's about to come out, the days are going to get longer, the rain's going to start coming down, and our garden and ourselves are going to get back out there and start growing again. And this theme of seeds is a perfect example of all of these different things that kids can get out of these lessons. When we're talking about seeds, there's so many academic connections beyond just the science of a plant's life cycle and a plant's needs, but also our older kids are figuring out germination rates of seeds and doing some hard triple digit math and percentages. We're also learning that seeds and nuts are really good for our health. All of that energy that a little teeny seed has to grow a big plant, when we eat those seeds, we get all of that good energy too. So we're learning a lot about how these seeds and the plants that will grow from them are good for our physical health and helping our kids learn about the food that they can nourish their bodies with. Also, learning about seeds and being outside in the fresh air, even when it's cold, is so good for all of our mental health. A lot of us, we saw in the poll, a lot of us are behind a screen. A lot of us are stuck inside this time of year. And this is such an important time of year to give students the opportunity to go outside, get fresh air. And even if they are in front of a screen, you have real seeds to touch and hold and sort and to watch and be curious and imaginative about. And of course, we're learning some life skills here too. It is incredibly powerful that our kids could go off into the world and grow their own food and grow food for their community, whether it's just in their front yard or a community garden, or if they want to become a farmer one day and commit their life to growing food for their community. These are all things that we can really explore just in this theme of seeds that we're really digging into this time of year. So if you've been here before, you'll know that we always start with a mindful moment. And this is true here in our webinars, but that's because it is true in my classes with my kids. So typically, if we were with the kids outside right now, we'd all be sitting around in a circle and we'd all take just a couple of moments to listen and look and breathe to the world around us. And we would really hone in on what it is that we can observe that's the same as the last time we were here and different from the last time we were here. And that helps us understand the change of the seasons and what we can observe when we take that mindful moment and we slow down and we bring the energy together and we become aware of the world around us. Now, I know that most of us are in our homes or in our offices or in our classrooms today. We're inside. And so I thought we'd do another little reflection here. So like I said earlier, we are coming out of this winter season, and that means a lot for the plants that are growing outside, but it also changes the way that we humans interact with each other and interact with our environment. Winter is really a time of slowing down and restoration and hibernation and hopefully finding a place of peace and solitude and calmness and dormancy just for a little while. But spring is coming. And what a seed really is it's that, like, when you look at these teeny tiny little seeds, all of these are going to grow up into this big plant. And it is this like hope and this promise of what's to come with a little bit of care and nurture. And so it's around this time of year, halfway through the school year, that I really like to slow down and think, like, we are also growing and nurturing our kids. What is it that I'd love to see my children and my kids become? What am I hoping to grow in my kids and my children over the next couple of months? So I'd love to take a couple seconds for us just to breathe, settle into our spots. If you were like me and we're racing in here to beat the clock at 3 o'clock and you still have your to-do list, let's take just a minute to breathe, settle in, reflect on what you would like to grow for your students this year. And then if you are interested in sharing, I'd love to hear some of those ideas in the chat box. We'll come back together in about 10 seconds. Any ideas that you'd like to share in the chat box of what you'd like to grow in yourself or with your students this year? I think mine would have to be curiosity. It's the word I keep coming back to over and over and over again. It's so hard when we're so far apart to build this like interest and excitement and curiosity through a screen. It's been so much more challenging. And that's really, really what I'm hoping to hone in on with my kids this year. All right, so let's get started here. The chat box is still open for anyone that would like to share here. We have lots of ideas starting to pour in. Please take a look at those. It really is beautiful to think that this sense of empowerment that you want to grow, the exploration, the problem solving, the inquiry you want to grow, the understanding that you want to grow, all of those things will happen with your attention and your nurturing. And a lot of that can happen through these farm to school activities where children have the opportunity to give something attention and give something nurture and watch something grow. That engaging empowerment exploration, this is the perfect context for this work to happen. So we'll talk today a little bit about all these different activities you can do with your kids to build those roles as caretakers, to build that engagement, to build that trust. All of these activities are a perfect context for that. So let's start with a seed's needs. And this is basic, but if we're going to think about like it's winter and it's cold outside and we want to do this inside, one of the very first things we need to understand is like, well, what does a seed need? And if outside can't give it to them, how can we give it to them? So of course, you know, if you've been to one of my webinars before, you know, we don't go too long without a song. So we are going to sing a seeds needs song. You might know this one from one of our previous webinars. And actually throughout this presentation, you might see a couple of references to previous webinars. They're all saved on YouTube, so you can go back and see them if you missed them. If you want the motions to this one, it's all on a previous webinar. But for right now, stay on mute, but we can all sing this one together to remind us of all the things that the seeds needs. So the song goes like this. And if you do have my little face in the corner, I will do the motion so you can see them. This song goes, I see you are a seed, tell me what do you need? I need some soil to grow and then the sun to glow. Water to make me wet, air for my leaves to get, space for my roots to spread, now I'm a plant. Yeah, saw some lips moving along, great. So those you can see in bold there, those are some of the things that plants need to grow. They need soil and sun and water and air. And then down there at the bottom, of course, they need space too. Now, the deeper we get into this understanding of what plants and seeds need to grow, we can hone in on our knowledge a little bit further. Let's go one step further. And what does a seed itself actually need to grow? And all a seed needs to germinate, that means to push out of that shell, the only things it needs is space to push out of that shell, but really it's just warmth and water. That's it. Because if we think about it, it is the leaves that take in all of the sunlight to do the photosynthesis, but it doesn't have leaves yet, so it doesn't necessarily even need light. It needs sun because it needs the warmth, but it doesn't need light yet. You know, and it really just, it needs those roots to get the nutrients out of the soil, but if there's no roots yet, it doesn't really need the nutrients from the soil, right? All it is this little bundle of energy, and the way to crack into that little bundle of energy and activate it is just with warmth and water. So that's what we work with our kids on all the time, is how can we give them warmth and water so our seeds can germinate? And of course, as soon as we see leaves, it needs sunlight. As soon as we see roots, it needs soil. So this really activates that understanding of the plant parts and the connection to the plant needs too. So let's talk about how we can give our seeds what they need. Warmth and water. Well, of course, outside right now, I inserted a couple graphs here because this is one of our standards that we're working on constantly with our kids, is reading charts and graphs. And you can even create this chart or graph by yourself with your kids and track your own daylight hours or your own temperature. But here you can see that our hours of daylight are pretty low this time of year. And we're going to have increasing and increasing daylight, but we don't see that sun very often right now. So outside, there might not be enough light and warmth. And then here you can see the warmth. And this is for Atlanta specifically, is what I pulled up, but these are available for anywhere, Savannah or Waycross or anywhere else. So you can find your chart and you'll see we're very close to that freezing. If you came to our winter gardening activities webinar last month, I believe, we did a lot of activities around what that freezing mark means. But what you see around February and March is that we're getting very close to moving out of the danger of freezing. And around April 15th here in Atlanta is when you are officially, according to the Farmer's Almanac, in the safe zone for being away from that freezing. So we're moving closer and closer to where the plants outside will have what they need. They'll have that warmth and we can water them all they need. And right now, I did want to mention that there are some plants that need a little bit less, that they can go outside right now, or February, March, they can go outside pretty soon. So I wanted to run through those, and then we'll really dive into what we can do indoors during these times, but there are things that go outdoors. So let's take a look at those. First, I will mention that there are a ton of resources out there for you. And there are varying degrees of depth that you can look at. So you can see here, the Georgia Organics Planting Calendar is one of my favorites because it tells you very basically what month, just generally look at the month. In this month, you can either direct seed or you can seed inside for these different plants. But you could go even further. And this vegetable planting chart that you see on the left here is the UGA extension one. It is great. It is so detailed down to the variety, the specific date, exactly what they need, and every single exact detail. You can also look at a seed packet. But you know what? I'm going to make it even easier for you. I'm going to try to tell you in like the simplest terms possible. I have looked through year after year all of these different planting guides, and I've just pulled out the couple of best, easiest things that are great for school gardens. That means, in my definition, that means they are hardy, they're hard to kill, and they're delicious. Kids like to eat them. And if they follow this criteria, they have made it onto my list here. And while I'm sharing these, I'd love to hear in the chat box what you guys like to grow this time of year too. In this cold weather, we can have similar crops in the fall as we can in the spring before it gets too warm. And so one of them is root vegetables. So you can see here, there's radishes and turnips and carrots and beets. You can get another round of those here in about February or March. If I had to pick one, radishes. Most of you have heard that before, but radishes only take 21 days to harvest. So you can get lots of cycles of those radishes in the next couple of months. They're easy to grow, so hardy. They hardly take up any space. There's like 16 of them can fit in a square foot. So if you have a little bit of space, you can feed a lot of kids those radishes. Also this time of year, you can put directly into the ground your kales, your lettuce, your arugula, Swiss chard, mustard greens, top soy, bok choy, I don't know what I forgot, all the leafy greens. These are the hardy sort of greens that you can grow. And of course, you can grow them just as like microgreens and chop them off when they're teeny tiny and eat them that way. You can wait till they grow a little bigger and chop a few of them, then they'll keep growing and chop a few more of them. These roots and leafy greens, we don't have too much more of our cold season, but you can get a couple successions in of these in your garden, directly out in the garden. And one of my other favorite things to grow this time of year is sugar snap peas. These are probably my kids' favorites. They're so fun because they grow up a trellis and they send out these little tendrils that my kids think are like little hands. And every once in a while, two of the sugar snap pea tendrils will reach around and get each other like they're holding hands. They have the most beautiful little flowers. And of course, the fruit, the sugar snap pea, is so yummy to eat and so yummy to eat just raw. That crunch is so great. So that's a really fun one to plant around this time too, around like February and March. All those things can go directly in the garden. If you want to protect them a little bit more, there's lots of options for season extension. We cover all of that in our winter gardening webinar that you can go back and check out. All right, so we'll head into what we can do indoors. Now, before we do that, I want to see, jump into the chat if you have any questions about direct seeding outdoors, or if there's anything else you'd like to share that you grow outdoors. Kim shared that she loves to grow radishes, beets, and kale. And I have to say too, like if I had to pick two things, radishes and kale. And actually, that's what I'm planting in my front yard garden at my house right now too, is radishes and kale, like just easy go-to. You can look through all the guides if you want to. If you want my top two and Kim's top two, there you go. Carol likes, cabbage. We haven't done cabbage in a while. That's really fun for a leafy green that makes that sort of head instead of those leaves. Cabbage and kale. Swiss chard, Carol likes. Carol Ferguson likes. Radishes, because they pop up so fast, for sure. Thank you, Janine. Yeah, keep sharing there in the chat, because sometimes that's just the easiest, is just put that seed right in the ground and it's ready to go. But we're also going to talk about seeding indoors. It has a couple more steps to give these seeds exactly what they need when the sunlight outside isn't necessarily giving them what they need. But it gives us an opportunity to start growing way sooner and to get the most out of this season, so that by the time we move these little bitty seedlings that we grew inside, by the time we move them outside, they are ready to fruit and flower and get the most out of that season before we have to leave for summer break, which is what we're always fighting here in Georgia, is how much fruit can we get? How much of these summer crops can we get before we leave school on May 25th or whatever it is this year? So the first thing we talked about is our seeds need space. There are so many options, and I'd love to hear in the chat box too. There's always so many creative ideas for recycled container for seeds. I showed up here on the top left. You can, of course, buy all sorts of different containers for seeds of all sorts of different sizes. You could go buy those if you want to, or if you go to Ace Hardware or Home Depot or Lowe's and tell them you're a teacher, you can often get a huge discount, if not a free set of whatever you need, seed trays and everything else. But particularly for seed containers, there are so many options of ways that you can use recycled containers around your home or around your classroom to grow seeds. So in these pictures, you can see there's milk cartons from the cafeteria can be used. Down in the bottom left, there are multiple different instructions all over the internet about ways to make these like origami newspaper containers that are great. You can use egg cartons. You can see that sort of in the middle. Cans. Kimberly Deladonna was sharing that tomato paste cans are really great because they're the perfect size. They're just those really small, slender sort of cans. And just a reminder that for any of these different containers, it's important to have drainage. So using with some of the cans or some of the plastic cups, you'd have to use maybe a drill to get through it, but they need a couple of drainage holes in the bottom so that the water that you put into the cup has a place to escape when the seed has had enough, so it won't get moldy and won't drown there in the water. So with any of these that are more compostable, like the one we're about to make with a toilet paper holder or the egg carton or the newspaper, of course the water can seep through, and that's perfect. That paper will eventually biodegrade. That's perfect. It's just going to turn into soil in our garden. That works. But for anything that's not permeable, like your milk cartons or your cans, just make sure you create a plan for getting some holes there in the bottom. Now I'm going to turn my screen share off so I can show you how to create a seedling little home container out of our toilet paper rolls. So if you have your toilet paper rolls or a paper towel roll, works really well, grab that. You'll also need some scissors, but that's it. This is a super easy activity, and I actually just walked my students through doing it when they were at their homes, because of course I'm thinking like, I have no idea how to deliver a whole bunch of seed containers to my kids. But then it occurred to me that they all have toilet paper rolls and they all have scissors. So this prevented me from having to do any delivery to my kids, and all of my kids could handle it. They were first graders too, and they can handle this. So I'll show you how. Let's see. Make sure that the speaker view is pinned. If you do not see me large, you might want to see these itty bitty little details. And I'll show you how I make this happen here. Okay. So if you have your toilet paper roll like this, or if you have a paper towel roll, I would just cut it down to a little bit shorter. And you need your scissors. And what you'll do is you're going to fold this, not all the way folded, but you're going to sort of press it in half here. And then you're going to make a cut that's about 1/2 inch up through both layers, there and there. So I'll show you what mine looks like. And go through both layers, mostly in the middle. I told my kids it's about as big as their thumbnail, about that far, something like that. And then when you open it up, you're going to fold it the other way. See, it was like this. I made that cut in the middle. I'm going to fold it the other way. So now my cuts are on both sides, my previous cuts. And now I'm going to cut in the middle again in about the same distance, about 1/2 inch, about like their thumbnail. So you should open it up, and this side might even look sort of square because you have been folding it pretty close to the square. And these all will turn into flaps. So you can, before you get started, sort of move these back and forth like that. And just get them ready to fold like that. Yep. And then when you're ready to make that bottom for your toilet paper roll, seedling holder, you just go around in a circle. And you actually can go either direction. But you're going to start with one flap and then fold down the next flap. And then keep going in the same direction. You gotta keep going in the same direction. Then fold down the next flap. Now this last one's the hardest, because not only do you have to fold it down, but you have to stick this little corner here under the other one so it looks like a windmill. So the bottom will end up looking just like that. See if you can make yours look like mine. Yeah, and it should stay pretty well. It does not always lay perfectly flat. And then on the top will be like this. So this to me is one of the quickest and easiest. The newspaper origami is also a relatively common supply, but a lot of my kids don't get newspapers at home. And it does have a lot of neat geometry and cutting, and a lot of my kids really love it. But as far as a whole group activity virtually, this one is much quicker and faster, especially if you're making many of them. Now I'll show you one of the limitations to this too. Let me show you back down here. This has a hard time standing up by itself sometimes. That's not setting a very good example because it's doing a pretty good job, but oftentimes it has a hard time sitting up. So what I'll do is I will put multiple in a container together like that. And then if I made that, it would be like that. So they would all stand next to each other where they can't fall over because this bottom is not completely flat the way that you've done it here. The other important thing about having this container, or for any of your permeable containers, is that you need something to catch the water. When you end up watering these seedlings, of course the water will go straight through and you don't want it to be all over your windowsill. So you need some sort of container like this, a little Tupperware, a tray, a plate, something like that works. And then you can put all of your seedlings together and sort of squish them in so they'll stand up straight and stay up straight, and you'll be good to go. All right, make sure to jump in the chat if you have any questions about how to make that happen. Oh, this is great. There's a lot of other ideas too. Yeah, definitely. April said that she uses empty eggshells to start planting seeds. That's a great idea. And used cans. Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, Carol, this was definitely the idea that, I've heard from some of my parents over the last couple of months that they're just like, your classes are great, but we don't have all these supplies and my kids need too much help. And that has been a challenge for me. But this is one of the activities that went over really well and the parents could totally pull it off. And most of the kids did it without their parents' help. Yeah, this is a really fun one. If you have other ideas for those different reusable free containers that you can use for homes for your seeds, please jump in the chat box and share those ideas. All right, so next we need to fill our homes with some seeds. With some soil, some sort of seed starting mix. Now, here's what's really interesting about little baby seeds is that, as we talked about before, they just need space to grow. They don't need those nutrients yet because they don't even have the roots quite yet. So seed starting mix is different from potting soil or different from garden soil outside, because any sort of potting soil or like soil from outside, like at my house, it would just be clay. It would get so compact in there. And if you put a little seed in there, even though it has a lot of energy, even though it has a lot of warmth and water, it'd be pushing and pushing and pushing to try to get those roots out, and it would be facing too much resistance. It just would not be able to push out of that soil if it's too compact like that. So for these delicate little seedlings to grow, what you actually need is a very light and fluffy and porous sort of seed starter mix, so that your seed can go just under the soil and that it will take just hardly any energy for it to sprout those roots down and get those leaves up and get them towards the sunlight so that they can have lots of air around the roots. They can get everything that they need there. So you can buy a seed starting mix or go to Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace or whatever's around you, and they will give you free stuff, especially if you say you're a teacher. You can't just go get a seed starting mix. And honestly, that's what I do at this point too. It is so much easier just to go get it. But there is sort of an interesting ratio and proportions recipe that you can do with your kids in person, if you are in person, to create your own seed starting mix. Now, I will say the ingredients for creating your own seed starting mix are not the easiest to come by, and they're not always that safe to be around. Oftentimes you have to wear masks around some of these ingredients, which we're all wearing masks anyway, but the ingredients are not as common. So it might be easier to do a seed starting mix unless you are really interested in creating your own sort of recipe with your kids and figuring out how to do that. Of course, those are both always an option. You also might have local farmers or other sort of local folks that make a seed starting mix. And that's where I've gotten some of my very best ones too, with some really good compost mixed in. All right, so you fill up all of your little homes, whatever your recycled containers are, up with seeds, and then you need to find somewhere to put them. Now, you could get a massive, beautiful greenhouse outside, or like a cool little bookshelf greenhouse. But honestly, I have always only used my classroom window and it has worked great, or my hallway window when I don't have a classroom window. So if you can get a spot near a window that can hold these seeds, at least during the day when the sun is shining, just like how we talked about the greenhouses and the winter gardening activities, how that heat energy comes through that glass, that light energy comes through the glass, and that heat energy, that thermal energy gets caught inside the glass. That's exactly what your plants will be getting on that side of the glass too. So finding a good home for them where they'll be safe, where they won't drain water all over everything. You can see in this picture, they are in a green tray, and where they can get that sun. That's going to be the perfect place for them. Now the fun part, you've made your homes, you filled them up with your seed starting mix, you found a good place to put them, what to plant. So again, you could look at all of the different vegetable planting charts from all of the different sources and all the different seed packets, or you could just look up all your favorite foods and see what they need. But here's my simplified version. These are the 5 things that we plant every single spring around February or March for our garden as soon as the frost date passes. And we remember it just like we remember a rainbow. So this is also our plant a rainbow garden. So we plant cucumbers, eggplant, peppers, squash, and tomatoes. 1 plant of every different color. And we do technically have blueberries growing on our property too. So that's like our blue for our plant the rainbow. But those are there year after year after year. And if you would like to grow blueberries at your garden or any other sort of fruit, berries, bush, or trees, this time of year is a great time to do that too. And if you're around the Atlanta area, there is the Alfie fruit tree sale going on right now that you can check out. But back to our indoor seating. If you are looking for what to plant indoors with your kids, these are these delicate summer fruits that you can start early indoors. Again, if you have ideas of what has worked well for you or what you've been interested in growing and maybe haven't tried yet, or any questions you have, please jump into the chat. Because one of the limitations of being a teacher, I have to say, is that I'm so busy and I just keep doing things the same way that I've always done, is always get the same thing, and it's really easy to continue to do what works and then get limited to all the other options. Please jump in and let me know what you like to grow in your gardens. But these are some of our favorites. And you can see our seed packets here. And then here in the middle, this is when they started to grow up. It's also fun to grow them side by side because their germination rate, how often they germinate, and their speed of germination is so different. And you can tell the differences in the plants even by the second that they grow up, what their stems look like, what their leaves look like. It's a lot of fun. And I should mention too, on this germination rate is not 100%, like ever, for anything. And that's something that took me a long time to get used to. I figured that if I planted a seed, it was going to grow. And if it didn't grow, it was my fault. And remember, we are doing this as an educational garden, not as a production garden. But this is something I prepare my kids for before we start. And we plant a lot of seeds because seeds are cheap and recycled containers are everywhere. We plant a ton of them for this very reason. Because typically, and we'll actually calculate our germination rates for each of our different things that we grow each year. This is a project for my 4th and 5th graders to do the math to figure out, okay, we planted 250 kale seeds and 200 of them germinated or sprouted. We saw the leaves pop up from 200 of them. This was our 80%, I think if I did that math right, is our germination rate. That is great math for your kids to engage with this time of year, and also sort of sets those expectations of how hard it is for a teeny tiny little seed to get everything it needs to grow up into a huge plant. It's really kind of magical that it does happen. And so we need to have grace for the times that it doesn't happen. And I put these specifically on here too, because peppers are, for us, particularly finicky. And I have asked some of my farmers too, Joe at Love is Love Farm. I asked him about growing peppers, and he has this entire very specific setup with these like heat pads underneath his trays that are kept at this very specific, like 76.2 temperature all the time for this certain amount of weeks. I mean, professional farmers that have committed their lives to growing food for folks have really honed into how to care for these seeds best. But you are a teacher, and your full-time job is teaching children. And so it's okay if only half of them grow. Plant a lot so that even half of them will be a whole lot. And this is also, and then cucumbers are very successful for us. I'm not really even sure why, but we have about 80% germination, which is great. This is also, oh wow, Samantha has red, yellow, and orange peppers germinating right now. That's amazing. We need all of Samantha's tricks because that is not something that I've had a ton of success with. But the kids love the peppers when they come up, all of them. The bell peppers, the spicy peppers, they love all of them. It's really fun. This page is also here as a reminder for me to give you guys a warning about the idea of having kids have one little seed that is only their seed, and it has their name on it, and they're going to take care of it, because what might happen, and that there's a lot of ownership around that, and that's very important for kids to have this sense of ownership around the project. But what often happens is that those seeds don't come up and the kids are upset and you've totally lost that kid and you can't convince them otherwise. Oftentimes I also like have a whole nother set of seedlings growing and I like switch them out and the kids don't know. I mean, I've done all sorts of things as a teacher to try to make this work. I'm sure you guys have some funny stories about that too. But plants do die and that's okay. And they can go back into our compost and feed our soil. But talking to our kids about germination rates and maybe sharing the project of all of these seeds are all of ours. And we're going to celebrate the success together. We're all going to take care of them together. That may be a way to keep every single one of your kids engaged in the project. But you know your kids best and you know what they'll get excited about and get engaged about. It's totally up to y'all. All right, so after you have planted all these seeds and some of them are growing, maybe only 50%, but that's awesome. And some of these seeds are growing, you know, it's gonna get warm here pretty soon, warmer and warmer and warmer progressively. But if you think about your seeds being inside and like a constant 72-degree weather, if you just one day decided, oh, time to go outside, you live outside now, then that little baby seedling that's been taken such good care of and kept at 72 degrees inside the classroom or inside the home, it'll go outside and it'll be a shock to the system. Even if it won't freeze outside, it'll still be surprising to that plant to go from 72 degrees to 42 degrees that quickly and that sustained. So what we do is what's called hardening off, or it's like toughening up our plants. And what we do is we put our plants usually on something with wheels to make my life easier, either in a wagon or in a wheelbarrow like you see here, or these big boxes here that you see on the right have casters underneath them, wheels underneath them. And we will roll our plants out to go to recess with us for just like an hour. I was about to say an hour or two. We don't go to recess for 2 hours, but just for like an hour while we play outside, and then we'll roll them back in with us. So we're taking care of our plants. We're getting them used to the outside. And then after they've done that for a week, we'll like roll them out earlier in the day, let them stay a little longer, then roll them back in at the end of the day, and progressively let them be outside longer and longer and longer. And this is maybe not totally necessary to do this big progression. The kids love it though. And they like, you know, this is what we were talking about earlier. A couple of folks in the chat said this idea of like nurturing and caring for something. This is part of that act. This is something they can actively do while they watch these plants grow to get them used to their new home. And then finally, when the weather is warm enough and when they've gotten used to the outdoor world, they can be transplanted directly into the garden and grow from there. And of course, that is how we maximize our season 2. You could wait until late April, May to plant any of these things. You could just wait till it's warm outside and plant them like that. But the reason why we would grow them inside and go through this process is just so we can get a jump start on it. Because all of these take longer than radishes, longer than 21 days, usually like 60 to 120 days. So we want to get them started earlier so that they have this chance to do that delicate growth. And then the second they're ready to go outside, the second the warm weather is here, we can maximize every warm weather day we have to grow those flowers and fruits before they leave in May. Now, the way that we do these seedlings and the seed mixes and the hardening off and all of that is very based on the fact that I'm a classroom teacher and I'm trying to teach the standards and I have limitations and all of that. But I thought it'd be interesting to hear from Kimberly, who works at Cosmos Organic Farm and has a lot of experience around what actual production farming is like, and hear from her on how they do seedlings and when they start and what sort of seed mixing they use and how they get their plants ready for the outdoors.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so at Cosmos, we start our spring and summer plants in the greenhouse in February, at the beginning of February. And we do make our own seed starting mix. But like Jenna said, for the purpose of a classroom, purchasing a seed starting mix is probably going to be easiest unless you can really control the situation, because a lot of the ingredients like the perlite and the vermiculite that go into a seed starting mix are not good to inhale. So important to wear a mask if you do create your own mix. And we baby our seedlings until about the end of March, and then we start putting them out in the ground. And it is still a little risky at that time because we will get freezing temperatures until about mid-April to late April at Cosmos. But we just cover our seedlings with a row cover and to protect them if we do get a surprise late freeze, and hope for the best. And I think an important thing to always keep in mind is that there is always something to learn from this, and plants are so resilient. So we've seen plants like grow themselves in the most unexpected places. Plants want to survive and grow, so they usually do. So you don't have to do anything super, nothing is, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way. There's a lot of wiggle room usually, and yeah.
Thanks, Kimberly. It's so great to hear how the rest of the world does this. And I love that idea. The bigger they get, the stronger they get. And it's really kind of fun to see what happens when you forget to water them when you go away for MLK weekend or whatever it is. And like Kimberly said, we definitely are always pushing dates, especially because, we're not pushing them so we can get the produce to the farmer's market. We're pushing them so we can see something grow before the end of school. But for our zone, April 15th is supposed to be the last frost date. But we every year put our plants in the ground before spring break. And our spring break is usually the first week of April. So we put them in and we just hope for the best because we're doing an educational garden, and that really gives us more time. When the kids get back, there's new growth, something exciting to see. Or one year, many years ago, we took all the seedling trays and the kids took them home over spring break like they would a class pet or something, and took care of them. And at that point, the seeds were so big, they weren't going to get hurt. And they brought them back and we planted them right after that. So if spring break is coming up for you and you're trying to figure out how to work it in the schedule, that's two ways to do it. But it's right around that spring break time. If y'all have spring break around that first week of April, that's the time that you want to start getting those plants in the ground, I think. Thank you, Kimberly, for sharing those ideas. All right, so the last couple of slides here, I want to show you some other different, just very quickly, other garden prep tasks you can do to get ready for spring, other indoor centers. I want to remind you again that we have a handful of webinars that are already up on our YouTube that cover a million other indoor activities, winter activities, farm to school activities that are great for this time of year that are all applicable. But just a couple others I wanted to point out here for other garden prep tasks. One is you can spend some time making a garden plan. And so figuring out what your square footage is in your garden, in your beds, having the kids creating maps. They could even do it on graph paper to do them very exactly and to label where they want each of these plants to go. Maybe it will even depend on which part of your garden get more or less sunlight, and they can choose that way. Or they can, my kids love to do it in the rainbow order. So we have our red, then our yellow, our orange, they have, or red, orange, yellow. They have a very specific way they like it lined up, but everyone creating their design is really fun, like rainy day or cold indoor activity. And go ahead and make all your garden labels and all your garden signage. This is the time of year to be doing that. So you can see here 2 ideas that I've tried before with varying success. On the left, we do a lot of painting on rocks, and that works really well. We recently have repainted our rocks, or new rocks, with the titles of each of the plants in both English and Spanish. And then here on the right, you can also see there's this white board in the middle of that garden. And I wanted to point this out actually as a mistake, because I think we can learn from those just about as well as we can learn from what works. But I bought these at Home Depot. They are just blank plastic boards, and I drew these beautiful things on them in Sharpies, and I did some sort of clear coat on them. They faded in like 9 days, and now, like you can see, there's nothing on them. So that didn't work very well for me. But the other things that have worked well are like broken terracotta pots. We have a ton of those. Broken blinds actually worked really well. These are things that my parents brought in. Of course, nothing that I bought. Popsicle sticks work well. But again, if you're doing popsicle sticks, like decide whether or not you would like for your kids to put their individual name on an individual plant, or if you want it to be a community garden. But the big idea behind having these labels, and please jump into the chat box and let us know like what you creatively use for labels. The big idea is that this makes your garden space, whether it's in your home for your neighbors or at your school or community garden, it makes it accessible for everyone that walks by that can read exactly what these different plants are. And you could go even further. You could do a guided tour with numbered steps around the garden to share and teach different things so that any teacher that comes up there with their kids can see and walk around and feel like they are welcome and that they understand what's happening in the garden. This is the time of year to do all those inside arts and crafts so that you're ready. As soon as it's time to go outside, you can bring your little garden maps, bring your labels, bring your seedlings, and make it happen. And of course, this is a good time to start working on preparing your soil. We have a lot of information about composting and vermiculture in some of our past webinars, but this is a time of year that's great to really spend that time to build it up so that when your plants go outside to the garden, they have all the nutrients they need. This is also the time of year that we do one of our big fundraisers every year, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like this year, but every year up until now, we have grown tomato seedlings specifically. We just focus on tomatoes because they're pretty good and easy for us, and there's a lot of different varieties of tomatoes, and people in our area love tomatoes. So we grow a lot of tomato seedlings, and then we sell those tomato seedlings not just at our school, but out in our community in a couple of different places, either at our farmers markets or outside of the Whole Food or outside of the church where they're doing the bake sale. But that's an opportunity for us to, it's inexpensive. First of all, the upfront costs are pretty inexpensive since seeds are pretty cheap. And we do buy containers for that one just so they all fit in like set trays that we can transport easily. We do buy those containers. We get the seed starting mix, but then we can sell each of those tomato plants for way more than probably even Home Depot could, because we have cute little kids that are selling them for their school garden program. So we make plenty of money for the rest of our season with that fundraiser. And you can have your 4th and 5th graders do that cost analysis of how much needs to go in and how much they can get back. But that's a great way to support your garden program. Also, if you grow too many seedlings, just send them home with the kids or have the kids doing this at home. And I will mention too that you could, if this indoor planting is tricky, it sounds like a lot, we're transitioning back into the classroom, there's too many steps, I already have 28 kids to take care of, I can't take care of 100 other little baby plants. That's okay too, because this time of year, you can also purchase seedlings. You can support one of your local farmers that's done this work in the greenhouse, and you can purchase seedlings and you can still grow those tomatoes, the peppers, the squash, all of that in your garden. You have not missed out on a whole season. You can still grow those in your garden. Just let someone else do all that hard work. That's totally okay too. There are so many access points to this, to having this spring and summer garden, and we can find a way that'll work for you and your kids and whatever your setting is. Because then by May, what we want to see are these adorable little fruits. So these are our squash plants and some of our little cherry tomatoes. I love cherry tomato varieties because of course there's just bajillions of tomatoes on there and my bajillions of children can all taste them. The squash is a little different because there's just like one and we all watch that one squash forever and ever and ever. But it's just so much fun and it's so different than our root vegetables that are like underground and we can't even see them growing. It's a surprise when they come up. It's like different than our leafy greens. We love our leafy greens, but we do them for so many months. And then all of a sudden you have these like bright red tomatoes coming up and these yellow flowers. I'm not sure if you can tell, they're like bigger than a kid's hand. Like they're huge. And to see all of these like different shapes and sizes and colors this time of year is so much fun for the kids. So whether you're doing all of your indoor seeding and growing the seedlings yourself or getting them from a local farmer, this is what you're looking forward to. This is why it's worth it, is these little moments with these kids and these special plants. So in review here, I'm going to let some of my students give you the review here, is that you can see on the columns here on the left, the things that you can plant inside are all of your delicate, colorful fruits. And on the right, in March and February, what you can grow outside are all your hardier greens and your root vegetables. Now, there are a lot of other plant explorations you can do during this time inside. And I call them plant explorations because, again, they're not probably the best for growing the seedlings that are going to move outside, but they're fun things to do with kids. So we have our teeny tiny little beanie babies. These are just like the lima bean in the window that you might have seen. I do them in little jewelry bags like this so that the kids can hold them and keep them and put them in their pockets and take them home and bring them back. Because again, a seed only needs warmth and water to germinate. So they don't really have to be in a window quite yet. And the kids get such a sense of ownership over holding it. Or you can see here, we put it on a necklace that they kept around their neck. And we just used a spray bottle to spray a little bit of water on that cotton ball to keep that moist. And those kids could watch their little beanie baby grow up. We do lima beans, we do sugar snap peas. Lima beans actually can be transplanted pretty successfully. My sugar snap peas have never quite liked moving out of the bag into soil or into the garden, but that's okay. These are plant explorations because we're learning a little something about a plant and enjoying that experience. Like beanie babies and chia pets. So these are our chia pets. Someone donated a bunch of grass seed to us one year that we didn't need, but we made these chia pets and they drew these faces on them and they could cut their hair and it was really fun. So we got a good, well, I was about to say a good educational experience without describing why that's educational. The educational part of this was that these became characters in stories that we wrote. They all had their names and their personalities and their haircuts, and then we wrote narrative stories about them. You could also create some root view cups, especially, or remember to put that hole in the bottom. But this is just a plastic cup, but you make a black sleeve around it because the roots don't actually want to be seen. They don't want to see that light. But it's like an ant farm, basically. So once that plant starts growing, the roots get out there to the outside. You can pull that plant out of the sleeve and see what those roots are doing, put it right back in its sleeve so it's safe. If you have older kids, this is a project you can do with water bottles or 2-liter bottles. These are capillary action cups. So if you can see here, it's hard to tell, but we make wicks out of t-shirts, and those are in the bottom from the soil through the hole in the bottle into the bottom where the water is. And what's really neat about capillary action is that this water, as soon as the soil is dry, the water will be sucked up through the wick into the soil, even though it's against gravity. It's a really neat project for some of our older kids to understand. This is also a fun time of year to explore what we call the exceptions to the rules, right? So we teach our kids year after year, we teach them that plants grow from seeds. That's what we've been talking about this whole webinar. But actually, potatoes grow from slips. You can regrow a green onion. There are so many plants that magically regrow themselves. And this is sort of a fun year or a fun time of year to have a couple of those kitchen scraps on a windowsill to watch how magical it is. That some of these foods, some of these kitchen scraps can regrow themselves from just a little scrap, just a little root. And of course, putting googly eyes on things are extra fun. So there's our potato with her googly eyes on it. And one of the other rules we teach kids is that plants need, like we went over earlier, soil, water, air, and sun to grow. But actually, there are some plants that defy those expectations, like this air plant you can see here in the picture. It doesn't need soil to grow. So this could be a fun time to find some of those little exceptions and follow those in the classroom. You, of course, can create your indoor centers all around your different garden themes. You can do your reading centers inside, your sorting centers, your different math or art activities around seeds or any of our food or farm to school activities. There's tons of indoor rainy day or winter activities that the kids can be engaged with. And I'm going to point out a couple lessons that are part of our other lesson sets that we have shared through the Turn Up the Volume lessons that are available on the Georgia Organics website and through some of the past webinars. So just to point out a couple of these that can be done indoors is the Space for Seeds to Stretch, this yoga kinesthetic activity where kids use their bodies to show how seeds grow. That's a great one to do inside. Any of our soil chef activities where we're learning about the different types of soil and how to combine them for the perfect mix. This is a great time of year to do that. Not necessarily inside, but great time of year to be doing that to prepare for your garden. Here are some of my favorite books, because of course this is when we are at the library every single week. This is the time of year getting all of these different books about soil chefs. Of course, seed tapes is one of my favorite rainy day or winter activities. This is creating this place for these seeds to live temporarily on this newspaper until you choose to take them outside and give them the warmth and the water that they need. So make sure you keep these in a cool, dark place or they will germinate on the tape. But these can be done at any time. And same thing with our newspaper square foot gardens. Those can be done right now, and then you can just save them in a cool, dark space until it's warm enough outside to plant them. All right, y'all, we made it to the end here. So much information, and I'm so grateful for everything that you guys shared in the chat. And thank you to my colleagues and for Ashley for jumping in with some of those links so you guys could get exactly what you needed there. I'd love to hear from y'all in the chat what resonated with you from that whirlwind presentation, from all of the ideas that were shared in the chat, some of the pictures and ideas that I shared. What are you excited to try? What do you think will work in your setting with your kids, wherever they are? What do you think you're going to do in the next couple of months? This is the time to make the plans for the next couple of months. This is always my favorite time of every presentation because I get so inspired hearing about everything you guys are excited to do with your kids and imagining all of the kids all over Georgia that are going to get to grow their own Beanie Baby or grow their own seedlings and take them outside to harden them off, or grow their tomato plants and sell them at the grocery store, whatever it is, whatever the exciting idea is. I get so excited to think about all the kids that are going to benefit from y'all doing this great work. I'm also going to throw up a poll here that is along the same idea of just how likely are you to try one of these indoor planting activities with your kids? It's really my goal as an educator of adults and of children is to make information as accessible and exciting and engaging as possible. And like Kimberly mentioned earlier too, there's so many ways to do this work. There's so many access points. You can go all out and you can do it all yourself. You can make your own seed starting kit. You can every single day take your plants out, but there are also other easier ways to engage with less money, less time, less energy. There are so many different ways to get engaged with this sort of work over the next couple of months. And it's my goal to give you many of the options so that everyone can walk away with that one thing that they're like, I know what I'm going to do. January, February, March are going to be better this year because we're going to, all of these ideas that I'm seeing coming up in the chat. This is what we're going to do. So I'd love your feedback on that poll of how likely you are to take one of these activities, do it with your kids, share it with your teachers and your colleagues. And in the chat, anything that you'd like to share with me, questions you have for me, or anything you'd like to share with each other about what you're planning to do. It's really encouraging to see all of that great work. All right, turning it over to you, Kimberly.
All right, this is the part where we usually tell you what our next webinar is going to be, but we're actually going to be taking a break from our Wednesday webinars for the next few months because we're planning the 2021 Georgia Farm to School and Early Care Summit. We'll be doing that at the end of April, sometime in the last 2 weeks of April, most likely on a Friday and a Saturday. Stay tuned. We are assembling a planning committee right now, and we'll be choosing the dates probably this week. So we're pretty excited about that. I need to award the Spirit Award to Becca Stackhouse, and there were a bunch of people who participated in a robust way in the chat, which is really wonderful. It's great for the peer learning. It's great for the presenter. It really does add a lot of energy. So thank you so much. Becca, send me a message at Kimberly@Georgia Organics with your mailing address, and I'll make sure that you get some really fun googly eyes so you can add them to all sorts of vegetables and pots of seeds, and we'll get you the seed starting mix, and you can infuse your spirit into all things living and non going forward. And as Ashley shared with you in the chat, there's tons of resources on our YouTube channel and on our website. So check the chat for those links or go to our website. If you have any questions, Kimberly and Jenna and I are here for you. And what else? I think that's it. If you want to stick around and ask more questions, we'll stay and answer them.